You're listening to the Codependent Millennial Podcast with Sophie Shiloh, episode 46, Oversharing. Hi. I need to take a moment to apologize for my long silence, my absence on this podcast, but I'm so incredibly happy to be back, and I'm also extremely happy that you're here. If you're listening, it's because you're struggling with codependency, with boundary issues, with people-pleasing, with guilt and shame and low self-worth, all of these symptoms of codependency. And I'm so grateful to have this incredible way of reaching you and hopefully helping you untangle some of these knots in your life and in your relationships. For more podcasts, blog posts, and lots of helpful content to help you heal your codependency, just visit codependentmillennial.com. So today we're taking on the topic of oversharing. It's a topic that I hear about all the time from my clients, and since it's been brought up to me so many times by my clients, I knew that I had to address it here on the podcast. So if you've ever found yourself tripping over your words in a conversation and apologizing for oversharing, if you have ever found yourself oversharing in an effort to gain someone's approval or their understanding because you're really consumed, with what they think about you and you're really worried about that, then this episode is going to be really helpful for you. We're going to talk about what oversharing is, why we overshare, how you know when you're oversharing in a way that's harmful to you, and how to stop oversharing in that way if you want to. So first, what is oversharing? It's subjective. You decide, there is different information that might be perfectly appropriate to share with one person in your life and might constitute oversharing with another person. So I do want to just remind you at the outset, at the beginning of this episode, whatever you hear ever on this episode or ever on this podcast, and especially in this episode, whenever you hear me, describing a situation or a, codependency healing rule or something like that, please remember to rely on your own intuition, to rely on your own knowing. And this is just one of the ways in which you can do that in a very concrete example here. So when we're talking about oversharing, right now, as I'm describing the subjectivity of oversharing, what information for you would be perfectly appropriate to share with one person, but oversharing to share with another person. Different information, different people, different situations, etc. There's no one definition of oversharing. That concept, you could argue, doesn't exist because it's so individual. So why do we do it? Why do we overshare? Sometimes it's to over-explain or to explain ourselves. Sometimes we overshare to try to justify our decisions, our actions, our emotions even. We might try to overshare in an attempt to earn or gain the approval of whomever we're oversharing with in that moment. Sometimes it might be to posture as if you have achieved something that you haven't yet because you think that you should have already. It might be to try to manipulate someone's opinion of you. That's in a very broad sense. That, the most general way I can say this is, you might overshare to manipulate someone's opinion of you. Yeah, that's the blanket statement there. So, of course, in these episodes, I always like to offer questions that you can use to reflect on your own specific situation to really bring this maybe bird's eye view conversation to ground it down into your daily life. Ask yourself, how, where, and why do I overshare? What information do I often find myself oversharing? Is it information about my health, my weight, my relationships, my decisions with what I've chosen to do with my life, my future, my past, my family? What is it? Is there a specific person with whom I constantly find myself oversharing? How does this feel when I do it? Well, we'll get into all of that in a minute, but just start to understand for yourself where your oversharing is coming into play in your life, in your relationships. So the next question, how is oversharing harmful? Oversharing again, the non-harmful version of oversharing is just sharing, right? It's just having a conversation that goes into a certain degree of detail. But oversharing, that's the harmful version. So what do I mean harmful? What am I talking about? How can words be harmful, etc. So oversharing undermines and chips away at your relationship with yourself and at your trust of yourself and your own intuition. When you overshare, it's coming from a place of putting your life in other people's hands. And I'm going to go a little bit into detail here because I know that sounds dramatic, but we'll break it down. So when you overshare, you are overstepping your own boundaries with another person. You're doing that. You're choosing to do that. Don't blame it on the other person. Don't try to, abdicate responsibility, because that's disempowering and that doesn't serve you at all. And it's also just not accurate and not fair to the other person. But when you overshare, you have decided that someone else gets to have more say over your thoughts and emotions than you do. You're putting your opinions of yourself in other people's hands, because you've decided to overshare in an attempt to manipulate their opinion of you, because you don't know how to be okay or calm or whatever unless you've achieved that end. And that's never true, by the way, that you just think that you need that in the moment. And that contributes to the oversharing. When you put your emotions in other people's hands in this way, again, it's disempowerment. We just need to understand, why is oversharing harmful? It's harmful because when you overstep your own boundaries, when you share more than you're comfortable sharing with this person, in the hopes of, changing their opinion of you, or in the hopes of achieving a certain reaction from them or whatever, you just distance yourself from you. You distance yourself from the power that you have over your own thoughts and feelings, over the sovereignty that you have in your own life, like real autonomy. Like, I know these are intense topics, but it's really true. Like, if oversharing is something habitually that you do whenever you go to make big life decisions, you probably need to learn how to rely more on yourself for making big life decisions. You probably need to rely less on the input of others around what you should be doing with your life. Does that make sense? Again, apply this to whatever situation you're in right now, but this is the example I'm running with now. So how do you know if you're oversharing? Good news is you always know, and there's no one outside of you who can tell you definitively, yeah, you're oversharing in a harmful way, or no, you're just having a, normal, vulnerable, deep conversation, whatever. You know the difference because you know how you feel. No one else knows how you feel. No one else can really, feel energetically when you've overstepped your own boundaries and tiptoed into oversharing territory. You know the difference. You know how it feels. You know the difference between healthy venting versus unhealthy dumping in a conversation, right? There's healthy venting in a conversation with a friend, therapist, even a boss or a superior. And then there's really unhealthy dumping that is self-indulgent, that is sometimes even harmful to yourself or to others. You know the difference. You know how that feels. You also know the difference between healthy explanation and communication versus unhealthy oversharing in an effort to gain external approval or permission or validation, whatever, all these things that we've just discussed. You know the difference between what it feels like to do something that undermines your relationship with yourself versus what it feels like to do something that bolsters your self-trust, your confidence, your self-concept, etc. You really know what that feels like, and you can get silent and tap in and understand what's happening and make a choice that serves you. Make a choice that is empowering. Make a choice that feels like you standing in your power. How do I stop oversharing? So if at this point in the podcast you've discovered, oh, okay, I do notice oversharing in these various relationships or these situations or around these certain topics in my life, I notice that I'm doing this, and I would like to stop because I notice the negative effects that it's having in my life or in my confidence, my relationship with myself, my trust of myself, etc. I'm going to tell you how. Awareness, breath, and patience. So breathing, meditation, walking meditation, yoga nidra, guided breathing exercises, things like this, to help you practice being instead of acting or reacting or acting in reflex or acting from your wounds and insecurities. Acting from your wounds and insecurities, like, lashing out is another way of saying that. This is the reflexive behavior that goes along with oversharing. It's kind of, I think in the beginning, I might have used the word vomit. It's a really unpleasant term, but it's pretty accurate. When you find yourself, you just find yourself talking and you're just kind of watching yourself as you do this. And you're like, why am I saying this? Why am I going into all this detail? I don't want to share this with this person. I don't feel the need to justify myself to this person. Why am I doing this? Again, the breath and the awareness, that space, that's what you need in order to, in that moment, change behavior, change course if you'd like to. You need that space, just a fraction of a moment of awareness and observation, awareness of what's really going on for you in that moment that's causing you to want to overshare, to try to justify your decisions, to try to get approval from this other person for your decisions, etc. When you get that awareness, it doesn't magically change your behavior. The awareness doesn't change your behavior for you, but it does become easier to let go of harmful behaviors when you see so plainly and clearly that they negatively affect you, like immediately and in the long term. You don't have to, go cold turkey here. It's not that the idea is to never overshare ever again in your entire life. Like, don't put that unnecessary pressure and stress on yourself. It's not necessary. It's not cool. It's not cute. It doesn't help you here. It's not contributing to your healing. Just know what progress looks like for you. Maybe a huge improvement for you would look like not answering every single question that someone, maybe a new acquaintance, asks you that you don't want to answer in a conversation with a new person. Maybe progress for you looks like changing the subject at dinner or taking a breath and checking in with yourself and how you feel before discussing something personal with someone who asks. Acknowledge your progress during this process because, again, it's not cute, it's not cool, it's not helpful to be weird and stressed out and pressury towards yourself. There's no reason to bring that energy to this transition away from oversharing in an unhealthy way. I so hope this serves you, and I hope you remember to use patience and compassion and love and celebration with yourself as you implement the content in this episode. This really can be an exciting, fun, fascinating process. It doesn't have to feel like discouragement, so don't make it feel discouraging if it doesn't have to be, my love, okay? If you are looking for more support in healing your codependency, you can learn more about my coaching program and how to work with me at learn.codependentmillennial.com. I hope you have an amazing, beautiful, empowered day, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye.